All right. Yeah. Sorry. No. Thank you. Sorry for the technical delay. Am I actually sharing a PowerPoint slide?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Now I will officially start. Oh no.
No, it's okay, Mark. We see your first slides.
Okay, you see the slide only because
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. That's short, no conflict of interest, and obviously the slides in a short time. How long? And yes, please say again.
If you can have a presentation of 10 minutes, 10
Okay, fine.
10 minutes in order to be sure that we are
Right.
able to exchange.
Yes, I'll try even to be shorter if I can, so as to make room for discussion. And sorry, I forgot to introduce you, Maggie, and thank you for this. Maggie is specialist of Europe, so I'm going to speak on the national level. And since Maggie was kind enough to join us, she'll be very much able to answer any questions about Europe. And so I don't have all details here. Since we're from many countries around the table, well, don't read that. I'm just going to give you colors. From left to right, this is regulatory, this is legal. First market access, and then we go through the right to the pricing and patient access and stuff. You see the logo on the green plot with can say yes or no for an early access, and well, has to say yes or no. And just next, orange, which is the main flow, giving advice about reimburse to the ministry about reimbursement decisions. I'm going to skip that. We'll go back to that if we need in the discussion. The HAS body that is responsible for providing this official advice to the ministry is called Commission de la Transparence, Transparency Committee, and they're nominated by the government, and they make the decision by vote. That's important. About 30 members, I don't remember, and final decisions are made by vote. How do they work when they have to decide about saying yes or no? Well, roughly about a reimbursement decision. They follow a method that's called a doctrine. I don't know the specific word for that in English. Well, it's the written method that is driving assessments, appraisals that are made. So you see there the first part is I share the links with you. The first part of this doctrine, I just took a bit of it. That's a focus. We need strong scientific evidence, and it's depicted here, detailed there. And those bullet points are of course, the object of several pages. For instance, don't read that specifically. It's not relevant alone. It's just to illustrate you that they think a lot about their doctrine, and they draw those kind of trees, like guiding, and they use this as a guidance, and it can be adapted for each request. But it's very detailed, and it's a huge reference. And they state about two things. Is it working? Well, clinical efficacy. And second question, how do we rate the clinical added value that encompasses the IG that the product that is being screened is in the landscape, in the big picture, and we consider the big picture with comparators, other options available, and so forth, and also the aspects of quality of life. And that's, of course, relates a lot to patient participation. Uh, Now, this aspect of quality of life um, is, I mean, it's considered as as serious. It's screened with about the same level of request, of quality request. It has to demonstrate something. So, for instance, they see quality of life as is it a main outcome or a secondary outcome in the studies, and they read also patients' contributions that speak a lot about quality of life. How does HAS involve patients? Well, I make it very short because we do a lot of stuff, and I choose here to speak only about drugs, pharma drugs, reimbursements. So for this committee, Transparency Committee, drugs, in the committee, there are nominated members because they're nominated because they they know their members, or they have a huge experience in patient representation. They're non-specifically, targeted to such or such disease, but they know the business, to say it short. Patients participate in working groups. They have hearings. We can do written things like checking documents. And I'm going to speak to you very shortly to finish about written contributions. Something that we set an open call questionnaire, open call that is, systematic. I'm going to show you something that you don't need to read, but put like sunglasses, check, it's like too many colors. Um, uh, yeah, each time a drug is going to be assessed by HAS. This is the big arrow assessment, and sorry, big arrow, and then yellow highlight the transparency committee, final appraisal, and vote for the report. This is like the path I just described. And for each drug going through this arrow, and there are a lot, obviously, and for those that are not really short-tracked, because otherwise there is no time, but for the rest, which is a huge amount, we have set something systematic. That is to say that we show on the internet that this drug is being evaluated, and that any patient organization may contribute, So I got, at the left one, the pharma uh, 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 gives the dossier, it's being processed, and processed in 2, green, second stage. And during this assessment, there is a window open on the internet, and on the right, number 3, we receive a questionnaire, and it's being and the questionnaire is being given as such to the committee members. And the patient representative of the committee member of the committee, sorry, they, at the beginning, when all the stuff is, the commission has been rebriefed for that. There is also a brief about the patient's contribution if we received them. The questionnaire, I don't read that, but just pick a few lines, and you will recognize that we ask questions that are dedicated, obviously, from to patients to be person like the how to say that, the objective subjective experience, well, the experiential knowledge of the disease. Don't know about the 10 minutes. I hope it's okay because there are just 2-3 slides, very short. One example that well, I'm going through it too fast, but you get like some kind of illustrations. You know better than me that drug. Uh, it was assessed at the beginning of the year, well, end of last year, uh, by the industry. Please assess that, and we hope, say the industry, of course, that you're going to give a green light to in your report for the government. I picked just one paragraph of the long summary report of that when they they discussed and they go there, and I didn't show that, but before they check about the clinical value as such from the they say yes, there is no question. We have evidence that it works for that disease or that population for that very drug. And they consider, well, they put that into public health benefit here, but they considered how impact on quality of life was assessed. But there were methodological issues here and some other points that I didn't put on the slide. And you see, they say here we have a method issue. That study doesn't actually provide evidence. So that kind and okay, and so they said that. And yes, you remember well that
Yeah.
because yeah, we received for that contribution through the path I showed you before. So, and yes, you will say, of course, better than me what was the position, but correct me if I'm wrong, but the global idea was that we need that drug. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
that was, yeah, that's it. And so the committee read it, it was presented, and it was every member, every voting one. So remember about the votes. If I raise my hand or do not raise my hand, it's me. So there are processes inside me that goes, and I have some kind of I'm rational, but there is still margin. I can raise it. Sometimes, often, it's not 100%, 0%. Sometimes, yeah, for obvious reasons. But the 30-70, the 40-60 is very common. So, considering of this, the vote, etc., they say the actual benefit of this very product is significant. So, okay, to include into the list of those stuff. That was the questionnaire from Agnes, and I forgot to put the last slide, but that doesn't matter. For the second parameter that I told you about, the added clinical value, that counts a lot because you can say yes for reimbursements, but low clinical added value demonstrate proven with evidence. If you say to the ministry that it's non-existent as to evidence, that's not good for reimbursement at all. It's not like saying no to reimbursement at all, but it's lower reimbursement. And of course, if the clinical value is high, well, there is no question. That can be discussed a lot if the second parameter is is considered zero or low. For this one, it was the lowest rate. So it's kind of conflicting with what the national organization said. But you understand that work that has been given by the public, because it's public institution, takes loads of parameters, and that the scientific aspect can be a real cutoff among so many other parameters in each time a specific situation. And with regard to rare diseases, the situation is even more complex. So it's not the HAS doesn't want patient access to treatments, it's the opposite. But there is some kind of inner cornerstone of philosophy, and I finished that in the doctrine and in the actual functioning of the Transparency Committee, is safety first. We're not going to give you a drug that is as efficient as the others, but we have, we have not enough knowledge about, for instance, bad effects. So we protect you. That's kind of the idea. And patients participate. I'm finished. Sorry if I was too long. I hope not. Thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you, Mark. Maybe you have some questions for Mark? I just have one question, Mark. Also,
Yeah, sure.
maybe something that we may add regarding the French model is also the early access program.
Yes. The early access program, yes, I just illustrate by a slide where it's shown, I hope. Yes, here. It's the green plot. That's before, sorry, after or before market authorizations for under certain circumstances that have to be, there are four boxes, very clear boxes that has to be ticked: severe, cannot wait, no alternative, and last is reasonable clues for good ratio, safety, efficacy in the big picture. And there, pharma can ask for early access authorization. That means it's funded. The next week, it's funded, and patients have access for no money, and waiting for, because they have to if they go there, and we say yes, they have to promise, or they're bound to ask to prepare a reimbursement dossier. Does that answer, Agnès?
Yes, thank you, Mark.
And sorry, and here their patients are included exactly the same way as for the. Yeah.
And maybe, do you have some questions regarding this assessment? Because Maggie, maybe you could give us an idea about what is the difference between the different country, because we know that in Europe, it's sometimes the discussion we had is the fact that some drugs are available in a country and not in another one, and at least what can be why the assessment is not the same. Maybe it's a candid question. So.
Yeah, I don't know how much I can really address that question. And not at all to put Francois on the spot, but I imagine that he might even know better about that than I do. As far as at the European level goes, we've had several iterations over the last almost 20 years of a project called UNETA. And this last version, which is called the UNETA Consortium, or United 21 consortium it basically exists to develop the initial versions of all of the guidelines and templates and everything that will be used under the European regulation. These then have to then be voted on and accepted at the EU level by all of the representatives of the different member states. And that hasn't been done yet. So we don't have, while we have things developed, nothing is official yet. So it's kind of difficult to really address. And I don't actually have that much information on the specific aspects of the pathway to access in each country. I know that there are huge differences and that some companies don't even take their products to market in certain countries. So that's obviously a huge problem. And that is also part of what this regulation is trying to address. So I don't know, maybe Francois, I'm sorry to put you on the spot. You may have a better answer or even more.
Right before, if I may, Maggie, just adding something to everything you said. We can keep in mind two words that they don't exist in French, but in English it's good. We have assessments, to the word we dedicate for scientific stuff. It means that should be reproducible. You put one scientific officer to process math, and they say, well, it goes that level for that scale of scientific stuff, assessments. And the global affair that leads to the vote and the report, we use the word appraisal. That means it includes assessments, but it's not limited to it, obviously, because there are so many other parameters, including patient's view. But maybe the patients, of course, may bring scientific stuff if they do like social science studies, etc. So there is kind of a overlap there, and so the idea of reusing Maggie, tell me if I'm wrong, is key for the European level, because assessment should be the same, and appraisal is national specific.
Thank you, Mark. I think that Alessandro will cover this topic in his presentation. So now, Alessandro, you can share your presentation and explain how it works.
Thank you, Agnes. Thank you, Mark. I think it's a good segue to my presentation here. I hope you can see my screen. So in the next 15 minutes, I will try to focus on an introduction to market access and reimbursement of pharmaceutical products. Definitely, let's say, higher perspective than the one that Mark has just provided. So just as a heads up, this is for educational purposes only. It's non-product related presentation, and it's intended only for this meeting. So, and I'm going to cover, as Anya said, this topic that was just being. So first of all, to start off, I would like to take a step back and just show some numbers around the complexity, the time, how much regulated is the pharmaceutical industry, and the time that needs to take a product from inception to launch. And here, I think it's interesting to just stop for 1 second and see, in comparison to other industries, how long does it take to take a pharmaceutical to the market, to the patients. So we have 10 to 12 years development, and we'll see the details later. But if we compare to other sectors, like, for example, even the generic pharmaceutical industry, where only 5 years is the average time from inception to launch, it's much longer, and there's a much higher level of risk, mainly related to the fact that generics are mainly about quality, and they can somehow take advantage of the fact that there was an originator already on the market before them, so they can use the data from the originator to launch. Other industries like the automotive industry, or for example, the commercial aircraft, despite they are very focusing on research and development, they somehow benefit from some, modular elements in their development of their products. For example, if there is a part of a commercial aircraft that doesn't work, that can be fixed separately from the rest of the aircraft, and this doesn't mean that that the process of research and development has to stop. So this is to say that the time to develop a pharmaceutical product is extremely long. And in the past 20 years, also the complexity to take a product to the market, and also to develop the necessary evidence to ensure that all the regulatory requirements are met has increased quite dramatically. You can see on this slide, for example, the amount of endpoints, for example, that a clinical trial was usually including in early 2000s compared to the 2011, 2015, or for example, eligibility criteria, investigative sites where clinical trials are conducted have increased quite dramatically. And this, of course, creates quite big delays and investments requirements to really develop new products. So we've seen how long it takes, and in these 12 years, we have 6 years where there is a drug discovery phase in the labs, and usually the most interesting molecules then are taken to the preclinical phase, and only a small portion of them after the 3-6 years are actually progressing to studies in human. As you know, let's think that maybe from a 5,000 to 10,000 compounds that are in the preclinical phase, only 5 will achieve clinical trials eventually. And this phase becomes very costly and very resource intensive, and takes another 6 to 7 years if everything goes well before a company could submit a regulatory submission, and another half year to 2 years for regulatory approval. So this is adds up to what we were saying, 12 years with investments that are calculated to be in the range of 1 to 3 billion per molecular entity. And this, of course, includes all the cost of those compounds that never seen the light at the end of the tunnel. So this is extremely time-consuming, resource-consuming process, and we have also to think that protection of patent protection is not forever. As you know, we have usually around 20 years of protection since filing to the patent office until patent expiration, with some extensions and some exceptions, of course. But we have to think that this is the time where the costs have to be recouped of this process. And then generics or biosimilars can launch, and they usually take the majority of the market in a very, very short time frame. So what this slide doesn't show is the extra time needed to achieve the final access, right? And that's exactly the topic that we will cover in a minute. But before jumping into that, I wanted to provide some additional numbers around how many, with some concrete numbers about how many products actually receive approval versus those that are actually studied in the humans. We have some examples from cancer, and you see only 12 out of 158 melanoma programs actually were successfully concluded. We have other similar percentages of conversion in other type of cancers. We have even lower percentage of success of drugs in diseases like Alzheimer's, where, for example, only 3% of drugs in the 20 years timeframe analyzed by this paper really managed to achieve a market authorization. One big trend that has characterize the research and development investments in the last years is definitely focused on two main areas. One is oncology, and the other is rare diseases. For oncology, you can see that almost half of the clinical trials in January 2020 were focusing on oncology indications, almost as 4 times as all the other therapeutic areas. While also from a rare disease perspective, and we have Francois here on the line that will definitely can comment later. We have a very consistent increase in the number of rare diseases and also very robust numbers of orphan drug designations that were awarded to new drug candidates. And this is especially important because this shows also that that there is interest in these areas, and the interest is mainly driven by the unmet need, but also by some regulations that, for example, are were enacted for rare diseases, both from a regulatory and sometimes also from an access perspective, that sometimes make the whole process a little bit lighter and faster and easier for drug candidates in these disease areas. Now we jump to the core of the presentation, and just going back to what was being discussed right before my presentation. What is the reason of differences among different countries in terms of reimbursement? So why does a product is reimbursed in one country and not reimbursed in another? Well, I think we just need first to highlight a main difference between the regulatory process and the reimbursement process. So the regulatory process, for example, in Europe, I know we have also Colombian, Canadian representatives on the line, but for example, in Europe, the EMA is centrally approving products from a regulatory perspective and assess products from a safety, efficacy, and quality perspective. When it comes to market access and reimbursement, we have one individual agency and a health authority for each country that sets the rules for the assessment of these products for reimbursement purposes, which rules are extremely country specific. You have seen those for France in the previous presentation, but I can assure you that there are not two countries with exactly the same rules. And this makes the process after regulatory approval extremely complex, especially because the requirements from each of these countries are different. So despite there are differences, we can highlight some archetypes among different countries. For example, this is an archetypization that we usually use for Europe, and it's very artificial because each of these markets or countries that you see here has their own specific rules and maybe also a mix of different type of systems. For example, starting from the clinical value-based markets like France that we have just seen, we have also Germany in the same kind of macro basket. And in these countries, we have clinical outcomes versus the standard of care, as Mark has just shown, that is really driving the willingness to reimburse a product in the specific market. Then we have cost effectiveness countries. In these countries, the government dictates reimbursement policies based on the value of improved outcomes versus a comparator here as well. Here the value, and we'll see that in the next slide, is done in a very let's say systematic and technical way, where the additional value provided by a product in terms of quality is calculated versus the additional cost that the specific pharmaceutical product will cost to the system. And based on that, decision on reimbursement is taken. A third bucket of countries are budget impact countries. And here, for example, Italy, Spain, the affordability of the drugs is really the key driver for the access. Of course, there is a very in-depth discussion around the clinical value of the new product being assessed, but there is definitely a huge attention to how much the new product will cost to the system and how will that impact the overall pharmaceutical and healthcare budget. So as you can see, the role of health technology assessment in reimbursement in the reimbursement decision-making process is extremely important. With that technology assessment, we refer to this multidisciplinary process that does not only consider the clinical elements, but also the organizational elements, the economical elements of a product that will be launched in a market. So if you will, it's a more holistic assessment of a product that may also hide a lot more uncertainties than, for example, the system that is used by regulators to approve a pharmaceutical product. Now, just to make a step further and trying to understand really what are the real differences across markets. On this slide, I wanted to show a couple of examples of and go a step further in how a new product is really assessed at country level. We have talked about relative effectiveness for France, and a similar case is Germany, and the clinical benefit evaluation is usually the first step in this market. And then there is a price negotiation based on the added value that a new product can offer compared to the standard of care. In these markets, there is a lot of focus on technical elements of the clinical trials, for example. Randomized control design, for example, is the gold standard. Very often, if we see single-arm trials, we see single-arm trials design to fail and to conduct non-reimbursement decisions. And also the incremental outcome versus the standard of care is really driving the benefit assessment. I want to highlight that there may be big differences across these two markets. For example, in France, there may be one standard of care, and in Germany, another one. And this makes the story very complicated from a pharmaceutical industry perspective, because if you think about the design of a clinical trial that needs to inform a regulatory approval and reimbursement, there will be only one, for example, one opportunity to develop one big study. So what is the right clinical trial comparator to choose for that specific study? Is it the same for France and Germany? If not, how will French authorities or German authorities receive the wrong clinical trial? And this may sometimes bring to negative assessments and the need to develop further evidence that can lead to a finally positive reimbursement decision. The systems are usually more transparent in a way and more intuitive to understand to all the stakeholders, because they're based basically on the clinical, more on the clinical elements of the story. And maybe sometimes they can lack flexibility, as mentioned. And there are very peculiar elements in each of these systems that can really impact the final assessment outcomes. For cost effectiveness markets, it's a completely different story. So in this case, the focus is really on what I was mentioning before. So it's cost effectiveness analysis or cost utilities analysis usually are focusing on the cost per quality. And the cost per quality is basically how much does it cost to increase, the quality of the adjusted quality of life of the patients versus a specific threshold that is usually decided at a country level. So these systems usually follow a very technical process, and it's very complex. And this threshold that deliver the final answer on whether a product can be reimbursed or not are sometimes very, very rigid. In these systems, for example, statistical uncertainty is extremely important. Long-term outcomes are especially important to consider when these cost-effectiveness or cost-utility models are built. And sometimes there's also a question mark whether, this quality system is really a system that is reflecting the real value of innovation. And many times it's difficult for example, for the general public to understand decisions taken in these markets because of the complexity around the evaluation. So, conclusion, we have seen that there are macro differences across different systems especially in Europe. We have here some statistics on the median time to availability of a new product. We see that, for example, we have the extreme of Germany, where pharmaceutical products are reimbursed by law after they receive a positive EMA EU approval. And then we have markets, countries where the timelines are much longer, and it takes a lot of time to come to a final positive decision. Then the causes of an unavailability and delay of specific pharmaceuticals are multifactorial, and they can include elements that can impact the time prior to market authorization. So, for example, the regulatory approval itself. We know that we don't have just one regulatory agency across, for example, the whole EMEA region. The price and reimbursement process is mentioned, the value assessment of the process, the need, for example, to develop new data or specific analysis in some subgroup of patients, the readiness of the health systems to accept and embed the new products and make it available to the patients, and finally delays from national to regional approval. And of course, in these countries like Italy or Spain, after the national approval, there is also sometimes the need to obtain a positive approval also on the regional level, adding up additional time to the reimbursement of the product. So with this, I've concluded my presentation, and I'm very happy to receive any questions you may have.
Thank you, Alexandre. It was very interesting to see the different archetype of country. I just would like to ask to Case and to Marta from Colombia, your country were more in which type of archetype?
Well, we have a sort of committee which actually evaluates everything, but I think it will be sort of a cost effectiveness kind of thing, but the budget is a huge factor in the decision.
Okay. Thank you, Christina. And your case in Canada?
Yeah, in Canada, we have a kind of a similar type of arrangement in the sense that we have a federal jurisdiction which does the responsibility of drug approvals through Health Canada. And basically, it's a long, protracted process, and it's heavily weighted on price versus quality improvement over anything that's existing. Once it's approved for use, then we have 13 other jurisdictions in the provinces and territories that are responsible for healthcare delivery and also covering any drug costs. So it takes an extraordinary long time for a drug to become approved until a patient is able to receive it. And whether or not they'll receive it at what funding level depends on each jurisdiction.
Thank you. Do you have another question for Alessandro? Giovanni? David?
Yeah, I guess the complexity of just to say actually, that's really interesting talk, because it's certainly I kind of had a good idea, but that's certainly opened my eyes to the complexity of the business that you're actually in, particularly when you talk about Germany being 47 days and Malta being 1,400-ish. So I kind of get why it's some of the things happen that occur. So that's really good, and I thank you for that. I guess that variance in countries must add a significant cost to getting these drugs to market as well. Would that be correct? Because you've got to have different people dealing with each of those countries, and yeah,
exactly. It's extremely fragmented. Also from a pharmaceutical organization perspective, we need people in each market able to understand the local needs and understand the local stakeholders' needs. And it's extremely decentralized, as you can see. So every country is a new story, is a new chapter, and sometimes the local decisions are completely different from one to the other, and you struggle to understand why is that, especially when clinical data are very supportive, right?
I have one question to address, but okay, sometimes it's true that I totally understand that it's time consuming, the 10, 12 years to, if there is the successful, the research and so on, no doubt. But I'm not a doctor, obviously, but recently I saw that there are some gene silencing or the RNA interference that may have shorter and may be used also for different disease. And moreover, in the case when one drug go to the next step, for example, an injection in longer time, why not to consider that the cost could be really a little bit lower, considering that some part for the studies has been performed? What do you think? Is something that is out of as sense, or could be acceptable like a question?
So I can provide my own personal view. So the patent protection of a product is limited. Sometimes there are extra patent protection offered in case new indications are developed, or for example pediatric data are provided to the regulatory authorities. This doesn't mean that the time to the loss of exclusivity is dramatically changed. This may adapt some few months or at maximum years. So I completely agree with what you say, in the sense that, and this is what happens usually when we launch new indications, because every time you have a new indication to add to, for example, to the European summary of product characteristic, you have to go and request it officially, and there is a pricing negotiation after it. And depending on the value of the additional indication, then there is a certain also price reduction that can materialize. Sometimes it doesn't materialize, it's very, very rare, but most of the times there are price reductions linked to that, also due to the fact that populations covered by the summary of product characteristics increase. So there is a larger opportunity for, for return on investment.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a question, Alessandro, regarding the clinical trial. You mentioned the cost was really higher now. Does it mean that it will become very difficult for a small company to launch clinical trial?
So this is a good question, and I think it's somehow linked to the current, the most, let's say, trendy business models for smaller companies. Let's say, as I mentioned, for example, in the rare disease space, the requirements in terms of of data is slightly lower than in other disease areas, and this makes also the story easier for some smaller pharmaceutical industries, right, to bear the cost of pharmaceutical development. Sometimes for some rare diseases, regulators are open to accept maybe phase 2b trials instead of phase 3, or to provide some conditional approval from regulatory perspective, especially if the unmet need is very high. So I think in general, the costs are very high, and we see what we call the attrition rate to be very high anyway, and it's also part of the game for this smaller company to be able to find the right collaborations as well, or being agile enough to conduct trials in an agile way.
Thank you, Alessandro. François, it's now your part, so we'll have a European overview.
Thank you very much. I hope you can see my slides.
Yes.
So after Marc and Alessandro introduced the current situation, I will complete with some discussions, some possible solutions that are discussed at the international level to facilitate access, but also to ensure that the innovation can continue. A few words on where we are with all these incentives and policies to boost the development of medicines for rare diseases. We estimate only 5% of all rare diseases benefit from a specific treatment. And these treatments are not always extremely effective. They are difficult to assess sometimes, which can explain the difficulty for decision makers to accept their reimbursement. But it's common in all diseases. Usually the first product that arrives in a disease is not necessarily the most impressive product, but at least it attracts investments, and the next products may be more interesting. All in all, we estimate that 10 to 15% of rare diseases have at least or had at least one product in development. So which means that the research is larger than we think in terms of if we compare it to the number of authorized products, but still the vast majority of rare diseases are really unmet needs with no or little investment. And there are products yet which are extremely effective. A recently authorized product is to treat cystic fibrosis, and they refer to now the combination therapy for cystic fibrosis, which has the capacity to prolong life expectancy from 35 years to 70 years of age. And it's rare to see such an effective medicine in rare diseases, but even for such a product, given the price per patient, there are issues with the coverage, with the reimbursement. So the budget impact is certainly one important aspect, the cost per patient, but also the demonstration of efficacy. All this has to be considered together. Just a few information on the situation in Europe, and this is another way to look at the data that Alexandre just presented. If we look at 38 orphan medicines that were authorized between 2015 and 2017, you see the proportion of the 38 which can be accessed by patients in different countries. One main explanation of these huge differences is that Europe is a heterogeneous region. We have high income countries and we have less high income countries, and the investment in health is not at all the same in all member states, so the affordability is not the same in all member states. So you can have member states which are convinced the treatment can help the patients, but they just don't have the resources to afford purchasing the product. So that explains a lot of the differences we are seeing today. Importantly, one key element for patient organizations is the early access or compassionate use, because even if it's true, for example, that in Germany the access can start the day the medicine is authorized, in France we benefit from really systematically, almost systematically, a compassionate use and early access for all innovative products. And I don't know what the current average is, but in the past, the information was that 80% of innovative medicines which are authorized are available on a compassionate basis, in average 24 months before the marketing authorization. And I think that's unique to France regarding early access to innovative medicines. And here, I think patients as observers, we see on one side for industry, what defines an attractive market for industry.
I'm sorry, I think that maybe we don't see the full slide.
Huh?
We just have the title.
Because it's coming.
Okay.
So first, and I think as patients, we share the same views that we need clear and transparent rules and national decision-making for each tier reimbursement and price. It's not always the case. There are some countries, for example, where authorities say, very well, but you did not submit all the information we need. We need this extra information, but the company did not know that. And it takes time, it prolongs the assessment. It would be much better if in all jurisdictions, each company would know clearly in advance exactly what kind of information they need to submit. Otherwise, it's not clear and it takes time when there is no corruption. Another aspect is the need to have rapid decisions and rapid implementation. There is this concept of fast uptake, and you can understand that both for the company, but for patients. It's important when we have a really interesting medicine that all patients can have access to this medicine the fastest way, as rapidly as possible, compared to different countries where the uptake would be much slower because you will need to wait much longer for the product to be reimbursed. And if all countries are very slow at reimbursing, that means that the company may have difficulties to generate enough revenues to recoup their investments, because at the end, generic products will come and then the price will be much lower. And that's important because the message to investors, not only to the pharmaceutical developer, but to investors, is if there are more and more difficulties to make profits with pharmaceuticals, then this may have a negative impact on investors. And we see a trend, particularly for advanced therapies, where investors are more and more hesitating to invest in these diseases due to the complexity to transform the marketing authorization in commercial successes. And we need also, well, for industry, an attractive market is also a country with an effective organization of healthcare, not only so that we can identify the patients are diagnosed, and the patients are followed up in specialized healthcare centers. Otherwise, if it's too difficult to find the patients, that means that the patients will not find the medicine. And of course, the objective here for the company is to maximize their revenues. For the payers or for health insurance, they have also considerations which sometimes and often apparently conflict with the interest of the company. The payers and the health insurance, they need to know if the benefit of the medicine provided by the medicine is clear, and they want to know what they are paying for exactly. They don't want to pay for something which is more a comfort. They want to pay for medicines which really have an impact in the life of the patients in terms of survival, in terms of fewer symptoms, in terms of quality of life. But often this is not well demonstrated. Often maybe there is such a benefit, but the information is not convincing. They also need to know, compared to other treatments, what is the new one adding? Because if the new product is not adding anything, then the price should be around the same. And the price could be higher only if the medicine proposes higher benefits. But that has to be demonstrated by research or confirmed post-authorization via different methods. And we all know, you all know very well that for our rare diseases and small populations, the information will be always more limited and the uncertainty on the quality of the results often high. It's not always possible to obtain comparative trials, to organize randomized clinical trials. And we will not change this. That will remain a major issue for most of the rare diseases. And this is why we need new methods. We cannot continue to say we need randomized clinical trial data and comparative data as a kind of a dogma, knowing that for most rare diseases, this is simply impossible to organize. So we need really a consensus on new methods. And there is a limited budget to be spent in healthcare. And it's clear, and we know, that what is spent for one medicine or for one patient cannot be spent elsewhere. So we need really to understand the methods, the different methods that exist to make fair and equitable allocation of healthcare resources among patients. The thing is, there is no consensus on how to make that. We know the objective, but we don't know exactly how to implement this objective in a fair manner and effective manner. To remind you also, one characteristic of rare diseases, the vast majority of rare diseases, and you see here in light blue on the left, for rare diseases for which the prevalence is known, the vast majority of rare diseases represent fewer than one patient per 1 million citizens. In the EU, it's fewer than 500 patients. And there is no way you can organize large randomized clinical trials in most of the rare diseases, given these numbers. It's also true that for the more prevalent rare diseases, in orange here on the right, where you can run randomized clinical trials more frequently, we don't see enough large randomized clinical trials, as if the developers would not really make all the efforts, the possible efforts, to provide higher numbers, to enroll higher numbers of patients in the clinical trials. So here we hear both things. On one hand, we cannot run randomized clinical trials in the smaller diseases, but in the higher prevalence diseases, we would like to find solutions to have more often the type of clinical trials that we need. So there are many proposals, and I will not detail all of them. And these were presented by Suri Moon at a conference recently. I will say a few words about the Netflix model. We also know that we need to have more often access to the data, to the information, also of failed trials. That is helpful to understand the context of the development for new products. We can discuss when a medicine benefits from public investment and public incentives, how can this be considered for the appraisal or for the price discussions? There are discussions for alternative models for the development of medicines, where instead to have a competition during the development stage and then monopoly after the marketing authorization, you have collaboration, cooperations first, and including between the public and the private sector, like for many anti-infectives. And then you have a collaboration during the development, and then you can have different methods like competition for the commercialization. I'll say a few words about some initiatives for voluntary licensing, and I will explain you what it is and why we really hope this can progress. The price negotiations, there are many different techniques to negotiate a price. The pool procurement, this is when different countries join together to negotiate the price with the company to increase the possibility to have higher rebates when they can guarantee that with this agreement, they will have a faster uptake of the medicine in these countries. We need to develop methods for health technology assessment, which make the process more fluid, higher quality, and also rapid in time with the development and regulatory timelines. But we know it takes time to assess technologies, but there are certainly ways to accelerate these. There are still barriers to competition that need to be addressed. And there are other tools like the Buyers Club, and I will also say a few words that can help. And sometimes hospital pharmacies can produce excellent quality medicine, and we have this discussion, particularly for some advanced therapies, where maybe it's not always necessary to industrialize the product. If it can be manufactured by excellent quality hospital pharmacies for just a few tenth or 100 patients in the EU, there is no necessarily a benefit to society to industrialize the product. Maybe we can continue with these exemptions and having the pharmacies continuing. So what is the Netflix model? I don't know if you are familiar with it, but the idea is instead of paying per unit, per package, and like for the Netflix system, you pay for a certain period. And this has been tested in Europe and also in Australia. And in Australia for hepatitis C, where initially in 2014, and you see here the numbers of people living with hepatitis C in Australia, and you see the price which was proposed initially per patient. When in 2015, they proposed a different way to pay the medicine. They would pay once for all for 5 years, $1 billion Australian dollars to the company, and the company would then ship as many units, as many packages as needed to treat all the patients in Australia. And that was extremely useful for the company because they often prefer to be paid 1 billion cash today rather than to wait many years to obtain an amount which is less predictable. And in that case, it really helped to treat many more patients than the authorities had thought. And you see here the number of patients who could be treated. And you see finally the end price, the end cost per patient, and which saved a huge amount of money to the National Health Service in Australia. And Australia will probably be the first country in the world to eradicate completely hepatitis C, because with such a system, if you get reinfected, then you are treated again at no additional cost. You don't have to pay twice for the treatment. And there are probably lessons to learn from that case. In 2015, in the UK, after a useful and effective medicine for cystic fibrosis was authorized already, patients were calling to override the company's patent and to buy a generic drug. And in the UK, that is called the Crown Use. They called citizens to sign a petition, and they had enough signatures to organize 2 debates at the European Parliament, where the Ministry of Health of Theresa May explained that he doesn't agree that citizens' taxes should be spent for the company to buy back shares to boost executive remuneration. They did not use the Crown Use. It's an equivalent of the compulsory licensing, but interestingly, the patients created a buyers club and they contacted an Argentinian generic manufacturer who was also producing the same medicine at a much lower cost, 70 to 80% less costly. and they had started to organize the import of the product as part of a clinical trial using this not authorized but experimental product as an alternative to the one from Vertex, more to put pressure on the company to accept a lower price, because even at £20,000, it was still too expensive for the families to pay for that medicine anyway. But it's an interesting development. Another one we really hope will have some effects, because it has been used against tuberculosis, malaria, and AIDS for a few decades already. It's when a company decides in which countries they can sell the product. They define their commercial territories, and then there are the other countries, usually in low, medium, and low income countries. And in these countries, the deal is, and this is organized by the WHO, the Medicines Patent Pool, the originator company, the patent holder, can give the license to a generic manufacturer, which will then sell this generic product in low and medium income country at a much lower price than in the commercial territories of the originator company. There are currently 57 such voluntary licenses that exist, that have been signed. And by the way, the originator companies receive royalties paid by the generic manufacturers, so they also win something. And that explains how 25 million people have now access to AIDS products in the world. And this year, WHO announced that they will extend this medicines patent pool to chronic disease, to cancers, but they are also working for some medicines to treat some rare disease where they would like to convince the manufacturers, the producers of these medicines, to make them available with no delay in low and medium income countries. So it could become a reality, this medicines patent pool, also for rare diseases. And in the EU, we have this regulation which countries, member states have signed, which explains that countries which are high income countries will not import medicines produced by a generic manufacturer when a compulsory license has been decided, and the same decision could apply for voluntary license, because we still need to protect the commercial territories of the originator companies. The low-cost generic product intended for low and medium income countries should not be imported to high-income countries. That would not be fair for the originator company. To finish, a few other information to you. This very important report by the Council of International Organizations in Medical Sciences on the involvement of patients in the development, regulation, and safe use of medicines, which explains and which derives from real-world experience of patients discussing with industry, with regulators, not yet with HTA, that will be the next book, but really a call for all pharmaceutical companies and national authorities and patient organizations to really establish a high-quality dialogue on all the aspects of importance to us. There are more and more training opportunities for patient advocates on HTA. There are more methods to involve patients than questionnaires. There are interviews, there are participation to meetings, etc. So here, just to say a few programs that exist in Europe, and I'm sure there are others in the world. Eurodis just obtained a European grant for ECAPA, where we will train patient advocates to be prepared for the HTA cooperation, which will start assessing medicines in 2025. So it will be a 4 to 100 hours training and capacity building and skill building program that we will start this year. And to finish, a few words about another way to engage with the patient community, and we promote the model of community advisory boards and as part of the EuroCAB program. And you see here the diseases where such CABs exist. So it's really a group of trained patients who offer their expertise to public or private sponsors of clinical research, and where they can discuss everything of interest the patient-relevant outcomes, the patient-reported outcomes, the design of the clinical trials, which information to collect during the clinical trials, how to demonstrate a medicine is useful for the patients, etc., at a very early stage of the development. And the same group of patients advise all the sponsors in their field, all the companies of interest to them. So the patients are not selected by individual companies. It's the opposite, the patients who decide with which companies they want to work with. And everything is organized, coordinated, and driven by the patients, and there are guidelines, standard operating procedures and templates that exist to facilitate this, so that the companies that engage with the CAB can discuss the unmet needs for different diseases, the impact of the disease, which symptoms are of importance to the patients, if there are scales to measure quality of life, or if not, how to build, how to validate a scale to measure quality of life upstream at a very early stage in the life cycle of the product development. So to conclude, I would say that involving patients in HTA can only improve the transparency of the process and also the quality, because patients will have a lot to contribute in these discussions on what is really the effect of the medicine in our lives compared to other treatments. A second conclusion is that health technology assessment is really key to provide information to decision makers, and HTA will never be transparent enough. It has to be high quality, and we need all the data that HTA experts are expecting to assess the technologies. But the methods, the HTA methods, should be agreed upon by all stakeholders, and they should be scientifically valid. And here I have particularly in mind the work done by other health economists, which demonstrated that the economic theory on which cost per quality is based is not scientifically valid. That was the European Eco Outcome Project. So there is a problem in jurisdictions which use cost per quality to decide which patients can access which medicines, when the theory on which it is made is not scientifically valid. I think in some countries, the authorities would not be legally authorized to use such a method for their decision-making. There are new policies to explore, to pilot, to see how they could fit in rare diseases, like the Netflix model. But among those that exist, they are not all used as they could. For example, market entry agreements or other ways to discuss with the developer, how can we make sure that only when patients benefit from a medicine, then the medicine can be paid. And other such market entry agreements. We don't see enough of those. And to conclude, I say that we are not asking for a special case for rare diseases. We are not asking for privileges or for more attention or special attention compared to other diseases. But in the fight against inequity by disease, we are calling to correct decades of not investing in rare diseases. So it's normal that we need to continue to have incentives and efforts to boost the research, development, and access to our treatments. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Marc. Thank you, François. It was very interesting to have your point of view and large perspective on what is feasible. I didn't hear about the Netflix model, and I think that it could give some idea for some country where there is no access. So I think that maybe it's something that could be interesting for some country. Do you have any questions for François?
Sorry, I was a bit long. I did not realize.
No, it was really interesting, François. No questions? It was clear, or do you think that it's really quite very complicated?
It is.
Ben? No, you feel more comfortable with the access?
You mean me?
Yeah, you, for example.
And a lot is quite complicated stuff. So it takes more time, and know where the situation in our patient organization has changed. And normally Doreen, they do a lot of things like that. So we have to take it over. And so I'm more involved, but I have excellent support by John, who is more expert on that field. So I think we will manage that. Get into contact with the farmers.
Thank you, Ben. So thank you, François, Alessandro, and Mark for your presentation. It was very clear and very helpful. It's registered. So I think that, Alessandro, I will share with you the link of the registration before putting online on our website.
Thank you, Agnes. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And I think that it's a very good format to share information. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you so much. It was
Thanks,
very
everyone.
interesting indeed.
Thanks a lot.
Have a nice day, and talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Hi, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Yeah.
Okay, finito.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have a nice weekend.
And you too. Thank you very much, Ben.
Thank you, Ben.
Okay, bye till next time.
Okay, bye-bye.
Mm.